I felt the liquid before I saw it. Cold, sticky, and smelling like expensive Merlot. My sister, Alexa, stood over me, the empty crystal glass dangling from her fingers like a weapon. "Oops," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "I guess I just ruined the shot. But let's be honest, Leah, that dress was trying too hard anyway." I looked down. The ivory lace of my gown, a vintage masterpiece worth $850,000, was now bleeding crimson. The stain spread across the bodice like a gunshot wound. I didn't scream. I just looked at her. "Clean it up," I said, my voice low. Alexa laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. "Clean it? It's ruined, just like your little fantasy of being important today." She reached out and grabbed the delicate lace near my collarbone. With a violent jerk, she ripped. The sound of 70-year-old silk tearing was louder than a scream. "Stop it!" I shouted, grabbing her wrist. "How dare you!" My mother, Valerie, was suddenly there, her face twisted in rage. "How dare you touch her?" Before I could defend myself, her hand connected with my face. The slap was so hard my head snapped back. I tasted copper, my lip was split. The room went dead silent. Everyone, the guests, the photographer, the staff, froze. I stood there, blood on my lip, wine on my chest, staring at the woman who gave birth to me. Then, a loud bang shattered the silence. The heavy oak doors at the end of the hall burst open, slamming against the walls, and what walked through them changed everything. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I stared at the open doors, my breath caught in my throat. But before I tell you who walked in, you need to understand why I was standing there, bleeding in a ruined dress, surrounded by people who were supposed to love me. My name is Leah. I'm 27 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the invisible architect of my family's life. My mother, Valerie, is obsessed with status. My sister, Alexa, is obsessed with attention. And me? I was the one who made sure the bills got paid, so they could keep pretending they were royalty. I work as a high-level tech consultant. My clients are Fortune 500 companies. I make good money, very good money. But to my family, I was just an assistant. "Leah's lucky she has a job," my mother would say at dinner parties. "She's so practical." Practical. That was their code word for servant. For 5 years, I funded Alexa's lifestyle. Her influencer career? Paid for by me. Her brand trips? My credit card. Her apartment in the city? My lease. I did it because I was trained to. Since I was a little girl, I was taught that my value lay in how much I could give them. It's a trap, you see. The trap of normalizing cruelty. You grow up thinking that love is something you have to earn. That if you just give enough, sacrifice enough, eventually they'll see you. You think their insults are tough love and their demands are family duty. You don't realize that to them, you're not a person, you're a resource. A battery to be drained, until it's empty. And this dress? It wasn't just expensive, it was a symbol. It was a vintage 1920s lace gown, studded with rare diamonds, worth $850,000. But its value wasn't just in the stones. It had belonged to my grandmother Eleanor. 30 years ago, my mother, Valerie, had begged for this dress. She wanted to wear it for her wedding. But Eleanor said no. She told Valerie to her face, "You don't have the integrity to wear this." My mother never forgave her. And she never forgave the dress. When Eleanor gave it to me last month, she didn't just give me a gown. She gave me a legacy. She chose me. And that choice drove my mother insane, with jealousy. So when Alexa poured that wine, it wasn't an accident. It was an execution. It was my mother's rage pouring out of my sister's glass. I touched my split lip, the pain throbbing in time with my pulse. I looked at Justin, my fiancé, who was already moving toward me, his face pale with shock. But before he could reach me, before I could say a word, the figure in the doorway moved into the light. It wasn't the police. It wasn't security. It was the one person my mother feared more than God. Grandmother Eleanor. She didn't roll in like a guest. She entered like a natural disaster. Grandmother Eleanor sat in her wheelchair, her back straighter than any pillar in the room. Her hands, covered in age spots and rings worth more than the entire venue, rested on the armrests. Behind her stood her personal assistant, terrifyingly calm. The music had already died, choked off by the sheer weight of her presence. Eleanor didn't look at the guests. She didn't look at the view. Her eyes, steely, sharp, and terrifyingly clear, were locked on Valerie. "Turn it off," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Turn off the cameras, turn off the music, turn off the lies." Alexa, who had been live-streaming the entire pre-wedding setup to her 2 million followers, froze. Her phone was still held high, capturing the aftermath of the assault. "Grandma?" Alexa squeaked. There was an accident." "An accident," Eleanor repeated. The word sounded like a curse. She wheeled herself forward, the crowd parting like the Red Sea. She stopped 3 feet from where I stood, still bleeding. She looked at the ruined dress, the dress she had worn 50 years ago, the dress she had entrusted to me. Then she looked at my mother. "I watched it," Eleanor said. "I watched the whole thing, the whine, the rip, the slap. Did you think I wouldn't check the stream, Valerie? Did you think I was too old to know how to watch my own granddaughter's feed?" Valerie's face went from rage to a sickly pale in seconds. "Mother, you don't understand." Leah provoked me. She was threatening Alexa. I had to protect her. "Protect her?" Eleanor laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You weren't protecting anyone. You were punishing Leah for shining brighter than you. Just like you always do." She turned to Justin. "Boy, get your fiancée a chair before she falls over. And get that blood off her face. It's unsightly." Justin moved instantly, guiding me to a velvet armchair. I sat down, my legs trembling. Eleanor wheeled closer to Valerie. The silence in the room was suffocating. "You wanted a wedding, Valerie," Eleanor said, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a scream. "You wanted a show. You wanted everyone to see how perfect your family is. Well, congratulations. They see you now. They see you perfectly." She signaled to her assistant, who stepped forward and handed her a thick leather portfolio. Eleanor opened it. "And now," she said, looking up, "I'm going to show you what I see." The air in the room changed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was the distinct, heavy pressure of a guillotine blade being hoisted into place. Eleanor rested the portfolio on her lap. She didn't open it immediately. She just let it sit there, heavy and ominous. Valerie was still trying to recover her composure, her eyes darting around the room, looking for allies. But no one was meeting her gaze, not even her friends. The violence of the slap had been too public, too undeniable. "You can't do this here, Mother," Valerie hissed, trying to keep her voice low. "This is a private matter. We can discuss this later." "Private?" Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "You just slapped your daughter in front of 200 people because she dared to question your favorite. There is nothing private about this family anymore." "Leah provoked me!" Valerie shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She threatened Alexa. She's been jealous of her sister for years, always trying to ruin her moments. And now she's manipulated you into causing a scene." Alexa, realizing her mother was floundering, stepped forward. She held her phone up, the camera lens pointed directly at Eleanor. "Guys," she said to her invisible audience, her voice trembling but determined. "You won't believe this. My grandmother is literally attacking my mom right now. She's obviously confused. This is elder abuse." Eleanor didn't even blink. "Elder abuse," she mused. Interesting choice of words. She opened the portfolio. "Let's talk about abuse, shall we?" She pulled out a single sheet of paper. "This," she said, holding it up, "is a summary of the Valerie and Alexa Lifestyle Fund, otherwise known as my revocable trust." Valerie went white. "Mother, don't. The Hamptons rental for this weekend? $30,000. Paid by the trust. Alexa's influencer budget for clothes and travel? $12,000 a month. Paid by the trust. Your mortgage, your car leases, your country club fees, all paid by the trust." She paused, letting the numbers sink in. "And as of 9 o'clock this morning, that trust is dissolved. You can't do that, Valerie screamed. That's our money. It was never your money, Eleanor said, her voice ice cold. It was my money, and I'm done funding your cruelty. She pulled out another document. And this, she said, is an eviction notice. Eviction? Alexa lowered her phone, her mouth hanging open. The house you live in, Valerie. The one you tell everyone you own? It's in my name. And since you seem to have forgotten how to behave like a human being, you can find somewhere else to live. You have 30 days. Valerie collapsed into a chair. Not gracefully, but like a puppet whose strings had been cut. It was pathetic. Without the money, without the status, she was nothing, just a mean, empty woman in a borrowed dress. The delusion of the empty wallet. They build their entire identities on what they can buy, on who they can look down on. Take away the checkbook, and there's nobody home. And Leah? Eleanor turned to me, her expression softening for the first time. I'm sorry, I didn't do this sooner. I looked at my mother, sobbing into her hands. I looked at my sister, frantically trying to end her live stream before her followers heard the word eviction, and I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction, just the cold, clean feeling of a balance sheet finally zeroing out. But we weren't done yet. Justin, Eleanor said, turning to my fiancé. I believe you made a phone call? Justin nodded, his face grim. They're here. Through the open doors, 2 uniformed officers walked in. And for the first time in her life, my mother looked truly afraid. The police officers didn't rush. They walked with the calm, terrifying deliberation of people who knew exactly who was in charge. Justin met them halfway, speaking quietly, pointing first to the ruined dress, then to my bleeding lip, and finally to Valerie. Ma'am? One of the officers asked, approaching me. He was older, with kind eyes that didn't mask his professionalism. We received a call about an assault. Are you the victim? The word hung in the air. Victim. For 27 years, I had been the victim. The victim of their neglect, their insults, their financial abuse, but I had never named it. I had called it keeping the peace. I had called it being a good daughter. I looked at Valerie. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and wet with panic. Leah, she whispered. Leah, please, I'm your mother. It was a mistake. I was stressed. Stressed? I repeated. The word tasted like ash. You slapped me because I wouldn't let Alexa destroy $1 million dress. You slapped me because you hate that I have something you don't. Leah, don't do this, Alexa pleaded, her phone finally lowered. Think about the family. Think about the scandal. The scandal. That was always their currency. What would people think? What would the neighbors say? Do you want to press charges, ma'am? The officer asked. In the past, the old Leah, the invisible architect, would have said no. She would have smoothed it over, paid the officers off if she could, and apologized to her mother for provoking her. She would have swallowed the blood and the shame to keep the family picture perfect. But that Leah died, the moment the wine hit the silk. I touched my lip again. It was still throbbing. I looked at the ruined lace, the physical manifestation of my grandmother's love, destroyed by my sister's envy. Yes, I said. My voice didn't shake. I want to press charges, assault and battery, and destruction of property. Leah! Valerie shrieked as the officer pulled out his handcuffs. You ungrateful little, after everything I did for you. You did nothing for me, I said, watching the metal cuffs click around her wrists. You took everything from me, my money, my confidence, my voice. But you're not taking my dignity, not today. The guests watched in stunned silence as Valerie was led away, weeping and screaming threats. Alexa was next. She tried to argue that it was an accident, that she tripped, but Justin had already handed the security footage to the police. There was no tripping, just malicious, deliberate destruction. As they were escorted out, the silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't the silence of shock anymore. It was the silence of judgment. The veil had been lifted. Everyone saw them, really saw them for the first time. And Leah? Eleanor said from her wheelchair. She hadn't moved an inch. I turned to her. You're bleeding on the carpet, she noted dryly. Go get cleaned up. We have a reception to finish. I looked at her, confused. But the wedding? The wedding is over, Eleanor said. The marriage hasn't started yet. But the party? The party is just beginning. She signaled the DJ. Play something loud. I want to celebrate. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. The police cars faded into the distance, taking the chaos with them. The reception hall, which had been a battleground minutes ago, slowly transformed. The tension didn't disappear, but it changed. It became lighter, cleaner, like the air, after a violent storm. I stood in the bridal suite, staring at myself in the mirror. The vintage lace gown was a ruin. The wine stain had darkened to the color of dried blood, and the torn bodice hung limp. It was tragic, and it was perfect. I unzipped it. It fell to the floor in a heavy, silk puddle. I didn't have a backup wedding dress, I didn't have a plan B gown, but I had packed a simple white suit tailored, sharp, professional, for the brunch the next day. I put it on. The clean lines felt like armor. I wiped the last of the blood from my lip, reapplied my lipstick, and looked at myself. I didn't look like a bride. I looked like a CEO. I looked like someone who had just closed the most difficult deal of her life. When I walked back out to the reception, the remaining guests, Justin's family, my few real friends, and the staff stopped talking, but this time, they didn't gasp, they smiled. Grandmother Eleanor was sitting at the head table, a glass of champagne in her hand. Justin stood next to her. When he saw me, he didn't ask if I was okay. He just handed me a glass. To freedom, he said. To freedom, I echoed. We didn't have a ceremony. There were no vows, no I do's, no first dance. Instead, we sat on the terrace, watching the sun dip below the Hamptons cliffs, painting the sky in shades of violet and gold. The ocean crashed against the rocks below, a rhythmic, powerful sound that drowned out the memory of my mother's screaming. You know, Eleanor said, looking at the sunset, I never liked that dress on anyone but me. It always looked heavy. But on you? Even ruined? It looked like victory. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. The trembling had stopped. What happens now? Justin asked, his hand finding mine. Now? I looked at the horizon. Now we burn the rest of the bridges. And we start building something real. The stain of the wine was gone. The weight of the family duty was gone. All that was left was the truth. And it was more beautiful than any wedding could ever be. 6 months later, I sat in my new office, the morning light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. On my desk sat a small velvet box. Inside it were 12 loose diamonds. I hadn't kept the dress. It was too damaged to save. But the diamonds, the rare, conflict-free stones that Eleanor had sewn into the lace 80 years ago, those were indestructible. I had them carefully removed, cleaned, and appraised. They were worth a fortune. But I didn't sell them for profit. I sold them for purpose. Using the proceeds, I launched the Eleanor Foundation. Our mission? To provide financial and legal resources for survivors of financial abuse. To help women who, like me, had been trained to be invisible architects for everyone else's lives, break free and build their own. I haven't spoken to Valerie or Alexa since that day. I heard through the grapevine that Valerie is living in a small condo in New Jersey, bitter and isolated. Alexa's influencer career imploded after the truth came out. They are ghosts to me now. Not scary ghosts, just fading memories of a life that didn't belong to me. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret pressing charges. If I regret ruining my family. And I tell them this: you cannot ruin what is already rotten, you can only clean it out. Walking away from your bloodline is the hardest thing you will ever do. It feels unnatural. It feels like you're cutting off a limb. But sometimes, that limb is gangrenous. Sometimes, cutting it off is the only way to save the body. I didn't leave my family because I didn't love them. I left them because I finally started loving myself. I stopped being the architect of their comfort and became the architect of my own peace. I looked at the photo on my desk, me, Justin, and Eleanor. On the terrace that night, raising our glasses to the sunset, we look tired, we look battered, but we look free. If you've ever had to walk away to save yourself, tell me your story in the comments. You are not alone.